Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back from the long weekend. We hope you all had a safe and happy Memorial Day weekend. We've got a loaded show today. Brendan Glasheen with a trio of DraftKings sportsbook and just DraftKings content specialists. Matt Meiselman, we'll get to him and how great he is. Shirag Hira, he's pretty great. He's a manager. Meant to get that in there at the top. And joining us for probably 2.5 minutes of great content, Julian Edlow. So the Celtics are in the finals, taking on the Golden State Warriors. We'll do some bigger picture topics first, but we will dive into game one, which is Thursday. We'll dive into series predictions and also just how we got to this point, specifically on Boston, because in January, it was a very dark time for those Boston Celtics. We will revisit that. Julian Edlow, please enlighten us. How are you approaching these NBA finals from a betting perspective? Give us your thoughts before we need to kick you out.
Yes, I will give you my power thoughts before my 2 minutes here runs out. I do like the Celtics. The experience on Golden State's side probably worries me a little bit more than it does Matt. I do think that it counts for something. But from a matchup perspective, X's and O's analytics, the number on the Celtics being decent sized underdogs is a little too much. So the Celtics are the side in the series. I think that my main take, if you're going to be betting game one, is that quick turnaround against the Heat for game one, when they had the 5 days off or whatever it was, and Boston only had a day off in between, set up a really bad spot for Boston, and they ultimately lost, although they were up 8 at halftime without two starters in Smart and Horford. This is the most time now between games that the Celtics have had off since games 2 and 3 against the Bucks. This is going to help them a little bit. The week for the Warriors, maybe a little bit of rust. So I don't think the Celtics are in all that bad of a spot in game one to come out and steal one kind of right away here. Maybe they lose 2 in a row after that because they can't get a win unless their backs are absolutely clamped against the wall. But I think the Celtics kind of start hot here. And the one thing I have bet already that will be in my best bets article when it comes out on Wednesday, but you get it here if you're listening, is Celtics first half. I think that the Celtics are going to get out to a really good start in game one of the NBA Finals. I want to know how Matt feels about that, though.
Come on, Meiselman.
I have so many thoughts, and Julian's not going to have time to listen to them.
Then start.
First of all, okay, I of course like the Celtics side in the series. I don't just think the number's too long. I think it's the wrong team. Like, the Celtics should be favored. That's part one. And then as far as like the back against the wall narrative, I guess maybe this is the thing I have the most issue with. Like, I totally agree with the rest and rust and that whole breakdown. Maybe I don't care about rust as much as you, but I think, yeah, it's better that the Celtics have 3 days and the Warriors have 6 than it would have been if the Warriors had 3 and the Celtics had 1, let's say, right? Like, they're both sufficiently.
Any day, it's all about the days for the Celtics. Any days the Celtics can get after playing every other day. They played 12 games in 23 days. So,
right. Yeah, it's and the series have been longer, obviously, and that's partly why. So I do worry that they're traveling from Miami to California.
Traveled from Miami to Boston and then Boston to California.
So that's problematic for sure. But I sort of agree with the sentiment that the first half looks better, because I do think that when a team is tired, it actually manifests more in the second half.
Yep.
Like, we saw that in game one of the Miami series, where the Celtics came out really strong and then clearly got gassed. And it was the same situation where Miami had the huge rest advantage. Horford was out for COVID and Smart was out also, but the rest was really the thing, I think, that decided game one after halftime. So I'm with you there. But as far as backs against the wall, this trend has existed in like 3 games. And it was not true in the first round of the playoffs, where the Celtics swept the Brooklyn Nets. And they've had other games like since then where they've won and then won consecutively. I think the example that stands out most to me is games 4 and 5 in the Miami series, where we would have expected a letdown in game 5, and we didn't see that at all. So
right.
I just don't really.
But it's almost worse that they let down in game 6.
Sure.
Than game 5.
But in game 6, like, yes, they didn't play great, but like, Jimmy Butler is the story.
Stole the show.
Yeah, like, that wasn't Jaylen Brown missing 2 free throws is not. That is nothing to me. That has nothing to do with their backs not being against the wall. He just missed free throws. I think the officiating was horrific down the stretch in game 6. And then Jimmy Butler was amazing. So to me, it was more about circumstances and Miami and not so much about Boston choking the game. So like, I just don't care so much about the back against the wall narrative, but I do care a lot about the ability to get some days off before the finals. So I'm with you there. And I do think the first half is a decent call, but part of why I think it's a decent call is because I think every single bet that you can possibly make involving the Celtics side is underpriced. So whatever you're going to say that's pro Boston, I'm there. And then it's just a matter of degree of how much I like it for different bets. But I think the Celtics should be favored in this series.
I'm gonna give you one other quick thing before I bounce, and it's not.
Then leave.
I mean, I guess then I will leave. I have a yard to mow, Glash. If
we were on a
this
tight
is a prop one, so I guess it's backing the Celtics. But Al Horford is minus 160 to score more points than Draymond Green in game one. In the player head-to-heads. Draymond Green starts, if you look at his game logs, he starts every series. He only scores when he needs to, and it's later in the series in more crucial games that he gets 10, 12, 14 points. He starts off every series with 2, 4, 6 points. And he has 8 total points in the 2 games against the Boston Celtics this season. Horford, decent matchup against Golden State. Kind of juicy, but I think Horford to outscore Draymond in game one is a prop that I like a lot and will also be in my article tomorrow. So I'm just giving the whole thing away tonight.
Peak for everybody. Well, it does seem like Otto Porter Jr. is going to play, so that's got to help this.
And that also, yeah.
And we don't know about Gary Payton, but I would imagine, Draymond's not neat. He had games throughout the playoffs so far where he was playing in the low 30s in minutes when games were close. I think they want to ramp up his minutes as this series progresses too. So you may be right that he scores more later on. Like he doesn't shoot as much until he feels like he needs to. But I also think it's true that his minutes stay more in check. Maybe that's different in the NBA finals, right? Like this is the end of the season. What are they saving him for? But he has seemed to have a general trend of increased minutes over the course of a series where earlier in the series, he doesn't play quite as much. Maybe it's 32 minutes early and 37 minutes later. But I do think we'll get into this, I'm sure, after you leave. But the Peyton thing, I think, is a really big deal.
As we say goodbye to Julian Edlow, we really appreciate you stopping by. As a way to send Julian off, let's roll the tape. Matt Meiselman put this together on his own. Such a narcissist Meiselman is. Dating back to January 4th when he told the world the Boston Celtics were still a valuable play on the DraftKings Sportsbook. Roll it. Thanks for coming, Jules.
Mm-hmm.
Boston, there's been talk about Marcus Smart, if the Celtics are going to make changes and whatnot.
Yeah, I hope not. I think the Celtics are really good. Like, I'm interested in the Celtics to win the Eastern Conference and the championship still. But yeah, in the East, like, the Celtics are just so undervalued still. Like, it's insane to me this team is still 25-1.
The Celtics are playing better, and you kept telling me that they're going to get there. And
I was doing it for you. You're the Celtics fan. I'm just I don't know what.
He is not a Celtics fan, but he is a fan of what makes for smart wagering. And you have been in on Boston significantly longer, quite frankly, than I have.
If you're playing the waiting game, you might have already waited too long on the Celtics.
Yeah, no more waiting game. You just got to take the Celtics now. I still think there's good value on the Celtics, despite the bad draw. Just like they're 5th in odds, and I think that they're arguably the best team.
And even after all that praise, Chirag, Boston's still, at least on the DraftKings Sportsbook, not even a top 6 favorite to win the championship. Would you buy a ticket at 12-1?
I would. Yeah. You shouldn't have to buy it at 12-1 though, because we were talking about it at 60
when it was like 30-1, 50-1.
They were 60-1 on January 4th for one of our shows. That was the first time we started talking about it. And the odds didn't correct really until after the Derek White trade. So if you've been listening to us all season, you had at least a dozen opportunities when the Celtics were above 40-1 at least.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty well documented. That is 4 months of content that is built to this point. On the day before June 1st, the Boston Celtics are in the NBA Finals. We will discuss Golden State. This won't just be a Boston program. I know the 2 green shirts on the show don't help. The other gentleman here is Chirag Hira, who is not wearing green. Chirag, your thoughts?
Well, I'm in a difficult position as a Lakers fan. So everybody that grew up a Lakers fan hates the Celtics, hates Boston. It is a given. If you grew up a Lakers fan, you hate the Celtics. All the new fans, the new Lakers fans, they're all LeBron fans. And all the LeBron fans hate Curry. So this is the thing that's been going on Lakers Twitter lately. It's like, which side are you on? Do you hate the Celtics because you're an OG Lakers fan, or do you hate the Warriors because you're an OG LeBron fan? Like, there's so many different mixes now of these fan bases. It's like, wait, can we just have both teams lose? Is that possible? And then ship the trophy back to California, but send it down south? That would be just great. Because I think the Clippers deserve it more than the Warriors.
So as the video maps out, Meiselman has found value in Boston for a long time. He's felt they haven't been appreciated. They have not been respected on the market for most of this time. So that's all in the past, and it's all great. I am not here to take away from the victory lap, but we do have a show to do today, and we need to serve the people going forward. Game 1 is on Thursday, but of course it allows for us in these next couple of days before the first game of the NBA Finals to find value. Chirag, I'll go to you first on this one. Meiselman clearly made his point to Julian at the top of the show that he thinks the Celtics, there's value everywhere in Boston. Whatever bet you want to make on Boston here out of the gate, in Game 1 or in the series, there's value. Do you feel similarly?
I do feel similarly, but I am a bit concerned that the Warriors, getting back to their pieces, like when I've analyzed kind of what these playoffs have kind of summed up, we've had Golden State an easy cakewalk through the Nuggets. Yes, they had the reigning back-to-back MVP, sure, but the entire team was decimated by injuries and they were playing basically backups. Then you get to the Grizzlies, who play well with their backups, but their star player who took it to another level was injured. Then they get to Dallas, who rightfully so beat Phoenix in Game 7 and blew them out and deserved to be there. But honestly, if you had said at the start of the season, like, what was the potential Western Conference Finals matchup, it was probably everybody who had Phoenix and Golden State. So the Warriors didn't really have that difficult of a road here, and the Celtics are really their first full team. Like, sure, Robert Williams dealing with something, Marcus Smart's dealing with something, but everybody is dinged up at this point. I just feel like the Warriors, due to the just having a little bit of an easier road, might have a bit of an advantage. But I feel like Boston, weathered team, Jalen and Jason Tatum playing in Game 7s together. Tatum now 4-1 in Game 7s. Like, this is a team that has gone through the mud to get here, and they played the Nets, who were favored against them. The reigning champions, sure, they were without Chris Middleton, but still went to 7 against the reigning champions. Miami, number 1 seed. It's not like they had a cakewalk the same way Golden State did. So I'm a little bit worried about that, but it just feels, because of the way that the Eastern Conference playoffs have gone, that the Celtics, I mentioned this earlier, Matt doesn't believe it, but it just feels like they're the team of destiny, whereas the Warriors just kind of like got a layup to get to the finals.
How about, we get some feedback in the chat. Miami Misfits on YouTube says, nice montage. If you took that back then, can't lose without hedging. Unfortunately, can't wager on those in California. This is true. But your first point is valid, Miami Misfits. In terms of, if you're on this ahead of time, is Meiselman, how would you go about backing Golden State if you had to make a case for him?
I honestly, I don't think I can do it.
I don't think I can. Yeah.
I don't know how to do it. I mean, what I will say about the Warriors is that they were missing key players. Like, the one positive I can say about the Warriors, they were missing key players last round and for part of the prior round, because if there's anything pro Warriors that I've been consistent on throughout the season, it's the value of Gary Payton II. And they managed to beat the Mavericks, which I'm very surprised by how easily they beat them. I thought it was going to be a coin flip series. I even skewed a little towards Dallas actually winning. A lot of that had to do with Gary Payton. And without him, I just thought the Warriors were not that good. And I still think that's true, but I think he's coming back. So that's kind of a big deal. So I am worried about that as someone who's on the Celtics. I'm worried about Otto Porter, who also I think is even more likely to be back than Gary Payton is. He seems less injured. I think they were being a little cautious with him at the end of the Mavericks series because they were up enough games. They want to make sure they have him ready for the finals. We don't know about Andre Iguodala, who I do think is low-key relevant too. I think he's an important defensive player for them off the bench, where you don't have to have Damian Lee, you don't have to have Moses Moody, you don't have to have Kuminga. Those guys don't have to be in the rotation when you have all those veterans playing. So my concern for the Celtics is that all those guys are part of the rotation. It makes the Warriors better. But at the same time, I think even if all of that breaks right, the Celtics are just the vastly superior team. And the thing I agree with Shrag the most about is the road to the finals, where, I don't know, I thought the Mavericks would put up more of a fight. Maybe it's because I thought the Jazz were better than they are. And so because the Mavericks beat the Jazz, I perceived the Mavericks as good because I thought the Jazz were good. And maybe the Jazz were just terrible and the Mavericks beating them was not that much of an accomplishment. The Grizzlies lost John Morant halfway through the series. They didn't have Steven Adams the first half of the series. That kind of worked out well for Golden State. And then, yeah, Denver, like no one thinks Denver is a great team. You know, I mentioned them earlier in the year, but we were looking at Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. as the reasons why you would maybe be interested in Denver to make a run. Without them, they're just like, it's Jokic and no one. That team's bad. So not a hard road for Golden State to get to the finals. And then on the other hand, you have the Celtics facing Brooklyn, who I think we're overlooking this. Like the Nets were good. The Celtics were just better. And a number of those games could have gone the other direction, like Jason Tatum buzzer beater as the clearest example. But game 2 of that series, the Celtics were down big and made a comeback. Like the Nets were not an easy opponent, despite the fact that was a sweep. The Bucks certainly were not an easy opponent. And I think that they were the second best team in the Eastern Conference, despite not having Middleton, above Miami, who the Celtics then beat also. But the last thing I'll say on this road to the finals thing that is probably going to surprise both of you, and I'm sure anyone else who's listening, is that I think the market actually overrated the Celtics dramatically at the end of the series. Like, I think the books were giving the Celtics too much respect. And I actually, this may be the biggest proof you need that I'm not a true Celtics homer. I'm just someone looking for value, is I bet on the Heat in game 5, game 6, and game 7, because I just thought the numbers were bad. And game 5 was especially weird because we had all these rumors that like Bam might have COVID or somewhat, there were some like cryptic tweets about maybe there was, and because of that, the Celtics line got a bit inflated. And so I thought Miami, like really, it was totally overblown to me that Butler looked so bad. And of course he, resumed being the Jimmy Butler we usually expect good things from. And maybe it's the next thing we should talk about, like Jimmy Butler's 3-point attempt. Oh my God. Like we almost weren't here. So I think the Celtics beat some incredibly good teams. I think the Warriors didn't. And that has a lot to do with why, to Sharag's point, that has a lot to do with why I think the Celtics are much better than the Warriors are.
Sharag, he's saying we now. You catch that? We.
You guys are we're
oh, you mean us? I thought you meant the Celtics. I thought you were.
No. We as a unit of Celtics fans, not me as part of the Celtics.
Oh, okay. Just clarifying.
Because I can't do that. Fans can do that. I'm okay with that. I can we reference the New York Rangers. You can say we in reference to the Celtics. But I'd like to be part of it if it's okay.
Sure. I just wanted to clarify what we meant by we. You're that bought in.
Yes, certainly.
So I want to, we're here for the people. I want to address the argument of rest versus rust. The rest is preferred. You mapped out the injury issues with Golden State, but those could no longer be issues.
Yeah.
I would counter that. Is it beneficial? See Tyler Hero playing 7 minutes in game 7. Is it beneficial to Steve Kerr to have more to choose from? Because now it's going to mess with your idea how to make rotations. Like, at least as long as it's not one of your core pieces, like for Boston, it's Robert Williams and Marcus Smart. If those guys can go, you're going to play him. Jimmy Butler, you're going to play him. But there is something to be said about having more defined roles if you are one of those surrounding pieces for Golden State. My point being is if those guys aren't ready to go, I still think the Warriors are going to be fine and still very, very valuable in the series. But what's the take on rest versus rust?
So
I guess it's more of a game 1 discussion because once the series starts, no one's talking about it.
So just a quick thing on the specific players is I don't think we can really compare Tyler Hero to these Warriors guys. I think Tyler Hero is one of the most overrated players in the NBA. He can't play defense. And for a guy who's playing hurt, his offense, like you're going to lose more on offense when you're playing through something because you need to be more like particular and precise with shooting than you do just playing hard and staying in front of people. Like an injury, like Marcus Smart playing hurt. It just doesn't, like his defense is still great. Gary Payton is a defense only player, basically. I think as long as, and he also had an elbow injury. Like if his legs are good, I don't worry about him. Or I do worry about him from the Celtics side.
We do have an update from Peyton per Kendra
just
Andrews. Gary Payton II says he still has some boxes to check before returning.
Oh, that's great.
Says he's starting to feel like himself again, but is not 100%.
We're going to see him during the series, I presume, but that does sound like he's not going to be ready at the beginning. So this is kind of a big deal. But no, Glash, like I understand what you're saying. Like a guy coming back after a long layoff like that, sometimes it's hard to integrate them properly. But I think because Peyton's role is just to guard people, it's not as difficult to get him back in the flow. Like on offense, he stands in the corner and doesn't move, and on defense, he
moves to help on the offensive rebounds because
but it's all effort based. His entire game, he doesn't have to think too much on the court. It's all effort. So like him being rusty, like I don't really worry about that for him. Porter also wasn't out nearly as long. He only missed 2 games. So I just don't think. I mean, rust is a different thing. Although when you're talking about veteran players, I think getting the time off, like we're so excited that Horford and Smart are going to have these extra games, but like Steph Curry, he needs it too. Like he's not a young guy, at least in NBA terms. I don't even think he's not even.
Well, their whole team, their core versus Boston's core. Boston, in theory, has the more rested legs, even though they are coming into this series with less rest, playing in consecutive game 7s.
Right. So ultimately, my big concern is specific to game 1. I think game 1 is the game that the Celtics are most likely to lose in the entire series, but it doesn't have a ton to do with the rest. To me, it has more to do with traveling from Miami and then to Boston, as Julian mentioned, and then to Golden State and being on the road after all of that travel. So it's a short turnaround, but they're also going across the country, whereas the Warriors have been waiting there for, I mean, game 4 in Dallas was like 12 days ago. Then they had a home game and they've been at home since then. So I'm more worried about that element. But that is entirely specific to game 1. And once we're past game 1, that's no longer a factor.
So Julian Edlow joined us at the top of the show. If you're craving his content, his picks that he maps out on his Twitter, we give him a hard time, but we love Julian and we appreciate everything he does in terms of the effort he puts into his work. We're allowed to bash him, but don't go on Twitter and bug Julian. I mean, do it, but do it nicely. But I now ask the both of you, how are you going about betting the series? And we can also I want to dive into the DFS, and not just for game 1, but like using the salaries for the showdown for the Millie Maker available on Thursday night as a way to kind of predict how salaries may change, what the proper build could be throughout the course of the series, because it's the same 2 teams. Julian mapped out a nice bet on Horford v. Green when it comes to points scored in the series. Yep. What are some other angles besides Meiselman? You're clearly bought in on Celtics futures, and Chirag, your Lakers fandom is just being tortured right now. What are some ways you guys want to go about game 1 or the series as a whole?
There's a lot of ways where we can honestly attack player props. I think that there's a market to look at when it's funny because Jaylen Brown, the one thing is Jaylen Brown is like crazy in terms of getting the first basket for the Celtics. It is just such a weird thing, but at plus 400 is actually kind of funny.
Yeah, he's a favorite.
He I don't have the stat directly in front of me. There it is. Jaylen Brown has scored the first basket 21 times for the Celtics this season.
Wow. You're talking about whole season, not playoffs.
How many wait, 21 times for the Celtics or 21 times in the game? Those are 2 very different figures.
Well, first basket scorer, it counts as the first basket scorer.
The game's first basket 21 times.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's why he's the favorite.
It's actually kind of funny to see that, but just something interesting to see, because I think with these, like when I've been looking at, we're at a period where it's like you built your bankroll. This is if you have been with us for the entire season, there's points where now you're at a point where it's like there's some fun things you could throw around, and I think first basket's something to have fun with. But then I would look at probably MVP futures next, because I think that is what really, makes a difference. Right here, we have Steph Curry and Jason Tatum as the two favorites. Are we going to see a situation where somebody else can step up? I think the only person that has MVP, there's two people that have MVP options here: Jaylen Brown and Draymond Green. Draymond Green because he can impact the game in ways, and he can get handed the Andre Iguodala trophy, and he can go crazy. What if he shuts down Jason Tatum or somebody like that? But I think of the players available here, you're not getting much value taking Tatum and Curry now, and the most value is coming in Brown.
What about Smart? He can get numbers. I mean, Game 7, I know it's like every third game.
What it will take is that if Marcus Smart shuts down Steph Curry, then boom, that's an amazing
the angle, right?
But yeah, I don't think he's going to guard Steph Curry one-on-one for like any, because there's just going to be a lot of switching, right? Like this is not this is not the Miami Heat who play isolation basketball. Like everyone's got to guard Curry.
Yep.
Yeah, so but I think Marcus Smart, and you look at previous tape from previous years, go back to the Bridgie era of the Celtics when they played. I mean, you go back and look at their head-to-head record, Boston, Golden State. I don't have it in front of me, but since 2016, when they had Isaiah Thomas and Smart was a rookie, Avery Bradley, Olynyk, the Olynyk shirt, get it out. It's relevant for this topic. Smart off ball when Curry's running around doing his thing, cutting and getting open on the wing. Smart's chasing him around quite a bit.
Right, I guess it's off ball is a little different because on ball it could be anybody, but that's off ball Smart's the guy you want. Although I'm sure Derek White can do a decent, like he has that capability. So does Jaylen Brown to some extent. Like everyone is going to rotate here because you don't want Smart to get gassed.
Yeah, and I just think sure Smart can do it and he can have those big games, but like, of the value presented here, Klay Thompson's going to be guarding Jaylen Brown. We've discussed Klay Thompson's decline considerably on this show multiple times. And while I love Klay, I think Klay is an amazing player. Like he's going to be Hall of Fame because of just how things have turned out. But like the value here is really Jaylen Brown to win the MVP trophy. If you want to sprinkle Curry and Tatum, have a Brown future in there because if God willing, there's not an injury, but you never know what can potentially happen. And I think Brown, with his offensive skill set and the way to erupt, he can drop 40 in a finals game. If you drop 40s in a finals game, like if that's in your range of outcomes, and you do have a chance to be MVP.
Yeah, narratives matter, right? I think everyone knows Tatum's the better player, and Tatum's the next great superstar, and Curry's the guy there in Golden State. But I think you're right. There's a drastic drop off here. If Brown has a 30-point or 25-point game one, and maybe Tatum doesn't have his best night to start the series, then maybe you see a switch there. You
guys haven't mentioned my favorite player for this market, though.
Well, please go. I was just going to ask
you.
What do
you think? 90-1. That is
I like this too. First finals appearance.
Speaking of narrative, right? Like, if he's at all in the discussion, I think there's a good chance he just gets it. And also, I just think all the Celtics are undervalued. So I think the worst bet on the board by far is Steph Curry, because I don't even think plus 110 is a good bet on the Warriors just to win, much less him get it if they win. And it's not like it's a lock that even if they were to win, that he'd be the MVP. There are a number of ways this could go. Like Chirag said, where like Draymond could get it, or I guess Klay could have a big shooting series, but I just don't think the Warriors are going to win. So I think my favorite is to take the long odds on Horford, but I also think Tatum at plus 170, like sure, Brown is live to some extent. I think it's still less than 10%. Like, I don't think this is that exciting of a line at 1,100. I think Tatum at plus 170 is like, if the Celtics are going to win, the probability that Tatum gets MVP in a Celtics win, that's got to be something north of 80%, right? Like maybe even 90. Like the most likely outcome for a Celtics series victory is Tatum is their best player.
Yeah.
So Horford is just a dart throw. I think there's like a 2% chance he ends up getting it, which makes 90-1 a good bet. But I think Tatum is like legitimately worth looking at. But you don't necessarily have to do that because you can get like plus 130 on the series. Tatum's not even that much higher than the series line. Yep. And I think we also just, maybe this is an important MVP point to highlight. I don't think there's a way, maybe I was a little like waffly on this in prior series. I don't think there's a way that a losing player gets the MVP, because if that were a thing that voters wanted to do, I know it's a different award, but Jimmy Butler was as deserving in a loss for an MVP of a series that you could possibly be, and he still didn't get it.
Yeah.
So basically, what I'm thinking is if Butler didn't get the Larry Bird trophy last round, they're not giving it to a losing player. Like, and there's too many stars in this series.
Yep.
Where like if the Celtics win, they're going to find a player on the Celtics. It's not like Curry's just going to get it. So
Yeah.
And if the Warriors win, they'll just give it to a Warriors player. Like I really don't think there's any chance that a losing player winds up winning the award.
That's a great point too. I mean, you said it. If you want to take the Celtics right now to win the series to plus 130, well, might as well dabble on Tatum plus 170, because if the Celtics win the series, their best player is likely the reason why.
I'm not doing it because I have the Celtics at like, whatever odds.
I already made the joke. If Tom Brady's house is still for sale in Brookline, Meiselman can take his Celtics winnings. Actually, forget the house.
Wait,
Meiselman
I thought wasn't Tom Brady's zip code Back Bay?
I don't know. He probably owns like a million places. But you know what, Meiselman, forget that.
I don't care which one.
Save your money and buy a duck boat. Buy a duck boat and then have your own duck boat for the parade in Boston.
The parade is going to be a good time. I can't wait.
You should come.
I will come to the parade.
And you can hold up a sign and say, I believed in the Celtics on January 4th.
Man,
can your face?
You guys are gonna make me really sad as a Lakers fan. I can't be dealing with.
Meiselman, I mean, Shrug, you can come to the parade too.
I'm going to go to the parade. I love championship parades. I grew up on championship parades. I went to all Lakers championship parades in LA. I literally my entire childhood growing up was watching Lakers go to the playoffs. I started with Kobe missing those air balls, but I was there when I could drive, when I could get to championship parades. I was there.
And if you know something too, you can then do what Meiselman did, cut this show today when the Warriors win in 7, and then you can play this when we do our first show after the finals and say, you guys were talking about buying duck boats 3 days before the series even started. So
yeah, really hope that
Warriors
really,
7.
really quick, because we should fit this in there for folks that play DFS. Give me a quick DFS minute on, doesn't have to be just this game, because I feel like it's going to look very similar throughout the course of the series, unless, of course, injuries, things change. But what's the approach to a general casual DFS user to how to play a showdown for this series?
So I think we have to think about the matchup a little more than prior series. Like I think Kevon Looney and Robert Williams could wind up playing fewer minutes than we might expect.
Yep.
Like I think there's a chance both teams go small. So I don't have a great insight as far as like who's the best captain. Is it Tatum? Is it Curry? Is it Brown? I mean, I lean towards Tatum being the best fantasy player in the series, but I don't have a strong take there. I guess what I'm saying is look towards some smaller ball lineups, or at least like if you're going to play the showdown throughout the series, try to get a feel for the way that like the teams are functioning in terms of like what format of lineups, not necessarily the specific players, right? Like if there's a game where Al Horford's in foul trouble and Grant Williams plays his minutes, that's not the thing I'm talking about. The thing I'm talking about is like, are there multiple guards together? Are the Warriors willing to play Poole, Clay, and Curry all at the same time and suffer the defensive lapse there? I do think that like we'll see more guards and smaller lineups throughout the series. So that's kind of my angle here. I think people have caught on that Derek White is really good, but like maybe Peyton Pritchard picks up a few more minutes in the finals than he did last series. He was very good in the first round. So maybe we see that. And then we also have to keep an eye on like Peyton and Porter and Iguodala, and that could have a huge effect on the Warriors rotation too.
If Peyton starts, you should consider putting him in the captain spot, because he's going to play, like we mentioned, it's an elbow injury. It's not a leg injury where he has to like work his way back in. I'm sure he's already staying in shape and running in the situation. So play him in the captain spot if he comes back and starts. If he comes back and starts, play him in the captain. That allows you to get Steph and Tatum in the lineup, no sweat for that contest. And then from there, you still have a lot of money that you can spend. So that would be my suggestion later in the series. For this one, I think that it makes more sense to try to, when I was playing Showdown for Game 7. I made a Tatum lineup. He was the highest scoring fantasy player, but what that forces you to do is that then you're stuck using a lot of the value options, and rotations might be tighter here and a little bit more difficult. You want to get Curry in there. Curry's a little bit more expensive than what Butler was. So that's what makes these a little bit difficult. So I would say try to build around the value captain option so that your upside has a higher floor because you can get Tatum and Curry in there.
Very good. We'll have coverage all week long on our DraftKings channels, YouTube, Twitch, also the Twitter stream. The Sweat airs every day at 11 a.m. Eastern time. We have the Slate, which is this program in that 5 o'clock Eastern hour. So look forward to coverage throughout the week and during the NBA Finals. Meiselman has made himself known to be a worthy voice when it comes to backing the Boston Celtics. So we will hear from Meiselman. If we don't,
I would actually say you got to give props to the guy. It's the end of the season. The Celtics are here. Cash the Eastern Conference Finals ticket. Sharp better. Worthy guy to be known as a sharp better. And when we get back into the full regular season, we're going to unleash the beast.
But I'm going to be back here before the finals anyway because I'm joining Kaufman on Thursday. I've been requested. So
I just want to let you guys know this guy is super duper sharp, and I have learned and grown so much as a bettor this year just by talking to him.
All right. I've had enough of showering this guy. He got his hour of glory. And Koff will do this basically same show on Thursday, with Koff. So thanks to everyone behind the scenes. Eamon, Tom Pike also putting that together, the little montage. Getting the montage up on the air. Meiselman put it together. He deserves all the credit. Format Meiselman, Shirag, here to follow their content over at DraftKings. 2 great content contributors, a manager included there in that duo as well. Brendan Glasheen signing off. Sweats at 11 a.m. tomorrow. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.